Hello everyone, Danielle here with Blooming Heart Shop. In this video, I will explain the different wire gauges for jewelry making. This is basic knowledge that will help you in your jewelry making journey. I really wish that I had watched a video like this when I was starting. It would have saved me a lot of money and frustration. So first, I want to explain the different wire types to you. There's going to be hard, half hard, and dead soft, or just called soft. Which wire type you need will depend on the project that you are taking on. I work with dead soft wire because of how malleable it is, and if I need to add some stiffness to it, I can always use my rubber hammer and my block, and that will add a little bit more stiffness to it. Also, when you are working with the wire, the heat from your hands, the wrapping with that wire naturally heats it up and gives it a little bit more stiffness too. Typically, when we are talking about craft wire, it's going to have a copper core that is going to be gold filled. What do I mean by that? Well, the difference between solid gold, besides the obvious price, is the longevity of the coloring. I don't typically work with solid gold because of how expensive it is, but if somebody needed a custom piece, I could always order some and work with that. That will last forever. It's not going to tarnish. It's going to keep that gold color and that gold sparkle throughout its entire life. I work with the high quality gold filled wire. Like I said, it's higher quality. It's just below the solid gold. It's going to have that copper core with the gold on the outside that's heat bonded to it. Gold filled has a nice thick layer on that, so it's gonna last very long. I would still take this off when swimming in the pool, the beach, showering, lotions and perfumes. Still take it off. It just adds to the longevity of the piece. But again, this is the higher quality gold filled wire. Gold plated wire is going to have a quick flash plating over a cheap metal base that's typically brass. A very thin layer of that plating on there. It will chip off, it will flake with heavy use, and it will tarnish much more quickly than the gold filled. Also, with gold filled, you can bend the wire 3 to 6 times before it breaks. With the gold plated, with that brass core, maybe 1 or 2 times and it'll break off. So before you start your project, you need to consider the metal type, the thickness, the shape, and the hardness. With the metal types, there is silver plated wire. It's got that same base metal with the plating on that, a heat bonded to it. It will wear off eventually. So if you're looking for a piece that's going to have a little bit more longevity to it, there's solid silver. Of course, that will be more expensive, but it will be a piece with more integrity. So there's solid silver if you're looking for that. Gold plated wire, again, what I use is the more high quality, and it will wear off eventually, but if you take care of it, it lasts a very long time. We also have colored wires that have a copper base or another metal base to that. They're typically very soft, very easy to work with, and also you need to remember the coating on there is very thin. So whenever you're using your tools and you're holding and you're wire wrapping with that, that can come off very easily. Maybe use some painter's tape on your pliers to help keep that pressure on there and not have it be so hard and aggressive and strip that coloring off of that colored wire. Another thing to consider, the wire shape. Very important. I didn't consider this at first. I was just buying wire all willy-nilly, but round is the shape that you will use the most. So look for that round wire. When you're buying it, make sure that you buy round. When I was first starting out, I was just buying wire all willy-nilly, and I bought this dead soft square wire. I did not read that it was square, and I got it, and I was like, oh, this is interesting. What do I use this for? And this is going to be used for wrapping cabochons, those flat gemstones that you can make into pendants for necklaces. The flat side on this square wire goes flat up against that, where the round would be all, you know, rolling around on there, and it'd be really hard to wire wrap this piece. You can put that flat up against there and wire wrap. They also have a half round wire for wire wrapping, where it has the square on one side and then round on the other, to give it a more easy and elegant look when you do the wire wrapping. It won't have those sharp sides. It's a little bit more rounded and pretty. So this is that rainbow moonstone with the black tourmaline. Eventually I'll wrap it, but make sure that you read and get round wire. That's typically the wire that you will be working with. Next thing to consider, the wire thickness, or the gauge of the wire. What you need to remember here, the thinner the wire, the higher the number. Smaller number, it's going to be a thicker wire. I've got sizes 28 to 18 here. These are the sizes that I work with the most. 18 gauge is going to be 1 millimeter thick. It holds its shape very well. You could make hoop earrings out of this, and it keeps that shape. I also make connectors for bracelets and necklaces out of the 18 gauge wire. I'll show you in another video how to make connectors with that 18 gauge wire. Next is 20 gauge, 0.8 millimeters thick. This is probably your most useful gauge because most gemstones, most beads are going to have a diameter hole of 0.8 millimeters, so that will be able to fit through that. That's how I wire wrap this gemstone ring. I also use my 20 gauge to make ear wires. Piercings are gonna be 0.8 millimeters thick, so if you used an 18 or a 22, it'd be too thick or too thin. So you're gonna use a 20 gauge for your ear wires. I'll show you in another video how to make those ear wires. Also, when you're doing studs, like these adorable heart stud earrings that I make, you use 20 gauge. So again, a very, very useful gauged wire, 20 gauge. 22 gauge, 0.64 millimeters thick. This is my second most useful gauge, I think, because if I'm using smaller stones, like this Peruvian Amazonite, I was able to wire wrap this with that nice bronze wire, make a nice pretty ring. That smaller gauge gives it a little bit more of a delicate look to it. If I was to use a thicker wire on that, it would kind of overshadow the stone really. So with the 22, again, very useful. Eye pins, head pins, those are going to be 22. Next gauges we get into are the wire wrapping gauges. 24 is that first wire wrapping gauge at 0.5 millimeters thick. I would use this to wire wrap a little bit chunkier stones, give it a little bit more chunkier wire wrapped look. I use my 24 to create my wire wrapped spider web earrings, and wire wrap my little spider with his little legs too. With 24, you also can make closed loops. I like closed loops because they don't break. I'll show you in another video how to make that closed loop connector. Next gauge is the 26 gauge, 0.4 millimeters thick. Next, in wire wrapping, you can use that to wire wrap smaller stones and give it a more elegant and dainty look. Pearls as well are going to need a smaller gauge unless you use a Dremel and tried to make that diameter of the pearl a little bit thicker. 26 is going to be great for wire wrapping. And then there's 28 gauge. I don't use this as much. It's a very fine 0.3 millimeter wire. You would use very tiny beads and very fine wire weaving with this. But just because I haven't used it yet doesn't mean I won't. So I'd rather have and not need than need and not have. All right, so armed with this knowledge, you can now start your jewelry making journey with hopefully a little bit less frustration and save yourself some money by buying only what you need. In other videos, I will show you how to use the different wire gauges to create earrings, bracelets, and necklaces, rings, and more. I want to thank you for watching this, and I hope you find it useful. Please like this video, and if you did, please subscribe to my channel for more in the future. And don't forget to bloom, babe.